Hello everybody, welcome back for another video. Hope you're all doing well and that you're all having a great day, and without any further ado, let's jump right into it. So, how do I begin? Because Bitcoin has not collapsed back down to $20,000. For those of you who missed it, there were a number of analyzers of the market who kept on saying that Bitcoin was going to fall much further, and the lowest one I found was $20,000. I always like to show off the most ridiculous numbers from a lot of those lower predictions. Since Bitcoin did not collapse down to $20,000, and optimism still reigns supreme, and the amount of money that's been flowing into the ETFs has continued to be. The optimism has once again returned, in a lot of the Bitcoin versus gold, Bitcoin digital reserve news has lightly dissipated, and guess where we are once again? Yes, we're back at where Bitcoin's going to be in the next couple of months. For those of you who've been missing it, or rather have missed a lot of the news, if you will, what's interesting is that a lot of people kind of have the exact same numbers. So previous bull runs, we've seen quite often that a lot of the predictions have been completely all over the place, to the point where a lot of them just sounded a little ridiculous. And then we started getting Bitcoin price predictions, I want to say around the end of last year, January this year. Let's fast forward a tiny bit to like the 12th of January, when we actually, that's crazy how quickly time is flying by. Oh boy. And then a lot of the price predictions have kind of like settled to around the exact same area, which I feel like is a good sign that everyone has different charts and they're all coming to the exact same conclusions. Even when the numbers get a bit special, that is to say, there are more people in this market who are more optimistic than others. And I don't mean like light optimism. I mean like full force, kind of thing. You'll see. So it says closely followed analyst. His name is Plan Bitcoin. You have definitely heard of him before. Believes that Bitcoin is going to rise more than 4x during this current market cycle. In a new, it says, strategy session? Sure, why not? The on-chain analyst told people that it would be a letdown if Bitcoin only ended the current bull market with a price of 200,000 US dollars. For those of you who have not been paying attention, the general consensus right now, at the time of me making this video, still before the halving, is that Bitcoin is probably, more than likely, going to have a $120,000 to a $150,000 price tag by the end of December. That has to, and I mean the news that we've been getting, I feel like isn't really giving the full story enough, because that 120 to 150,000 US dollars per Bitcoin is just based off, I mean literally just based off of the inflows from BlackRock. If you've watched the last, I want to say 22, 23 videos. Why that number? I don't know. It just sounds correct. The amount of news about prices has roughly correlated with analysts continuously only talking about BlackRock's inflows. You know, forget all about Fidelity and these 7 other companies who are also within the space. They're focusing just on BlackRock. And you've heard the number before. Depending on the day, BlackRock's inflows into their ETF are anywhere from 10 to 13 times the amount of Bitcoin that's being mined each day. After the halving, BlackRock alone will be absorbing 20 to 26 times the amount of Bitcoin that's being accumulated per day. And when I say I wish we had more of the full picture, because people are just focusing on BlackRock, I can only assume that BlackRock, Fidelity, the other 7 companies, MicroStrategy, the people from Tether, the people from that Latin American gold company who we were talking about a couple of days ago, etc. I mean, and all of you, every other company also buying, we are probably will see accumulation rates of like over 60, 70, 80x of what's actually being created per day. Thus, the idea is that by the end of this year, we would see not only a 6-figure Bitcoin, which many people are predicting around summertime. We'll see what ends up happening. The world's really intense right now. And then by the time we get to December, we'd hit the 120 to 120 to 150. And the idea is that if we just get to 200,000 by 2025, well, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because typically the year before the year after the halving, we go up, but we don't go up. I know I sound completely insane. Plan B says his stock to flow model, which compares the amount of a commodity in circulation divided by the amount produced each year, suggests that Bitcoin will see, he says that Bitcoin will see a rally of more than 660% from current prices before the market cycle ends, he says, and I do quote, "So the next top will not be in this year, 2024, but next year, 2025. This is typically how it works out. That top, some people talk about 200K as the next top. You can see on the chart below that would be very underwhelming. In fact, from a stock to flow perspective, we need a top that's much higher than the, okay. So here's where his numbers get a bit intense. And I caution you beforehand, because I can already feel some of your reactions before I can feel it, before I even say the actual numbers. We've heard these numbers, to be fair, said by Samson Mao, the other guy who's the current, Adam Back, the current head of Blockstream. I think Mr. Novogratz, we also heard it from, I think Kathy Wood was also in this boat as well. Hers were slightly lower numbers, but it's relatively the same. And, oh gosh, Arthur Hayes also said it in someone else. The generalized idea is that if we hit 150K by the end of this year, we might hit really crazy numbers that a lot of people might not be ready for. That's if all these charts work out, and if the market cycle, and I say this in the most honest way, if our market cycle is not plagued by another 2021 style event that ends up popping up. If we see the normal movements, if the ETF accumulation continues, if you continue accumulating, if the FOMO hits, people get into our market, etc., etc. He says we need a top that's much higher than the average. The first number he says is $500,000 per Bitcoin. He then says, so let's say 600,000 or 700,000, maybe $1 million. So the top will be higher than $500,000 in 2025. And here's a chart right here. So this chart has gained a large amount of fame over the course of the last few years. The issue is that a lot of people were, specifically with this man, annoyed with Plan B because his stock to flow model had worked every other year but did not work as precisely as expected during 2020 and 2021. And I remember him explaining, like, two people on Twitter. He was like, do you remember what happened in 2021? He's like, and I've said this thousands of times, everyone was literally terrified. No one knew what was going to happen with their banking. Remember the banking crisis? With their bank accounts, with themselves, with their jobs. People were in savings mode. Like literally in every, way of using that word. And he says, as such, the amount of fear that was gripping the markets, regardless of what the tech stocks might have been doing or how great Amazon was doing, everyone else, you must remember the panic that was flowing. So he said, this is the reason. And that's why I also said, if we do not see another similar style event, then the market will perform the way that it has during the other halvings. His chart, and I mean every line represents another $100,000. That's all of these lines, and they get smaller and smaller. His is pointing to roughly around $400,000 to $500,000 per coin if it hits this line. So you see, the line is always hit, but the yellow always appears. This is the gray line right here. For those of you not looking at the screen, his chart has a bunch of gray lines, which is kind of the average of where he's expecting it to hit. But it always, the word's not transcends, goes above what he's actually showing. So the gray line is right here, this thick gray line. Then yellow appears. Here's the gray line. So we hit the number. But the problem is that this right here was the crater. This was the bad times and the long ago. So this line right here represents more than a $500,000 Bitcoin, this gray line. And as we've seen before, the line goes above the target in the yellow and then slowly proceeds to enter green again. So we are still in the dark blue. We are still here. We have not even entered red yet. Red means full force, full rocket, and this tends to last for about a good 12 months or so. The yellow appears, and when the yellow begins, this is how you normally know that the market is like getting ready for that final swing, if you will. So the numbers make sense, but I think collectively or mentally most of us are at a point where I think 100,000 is the like really big psychological level. It sounds nonsensical, but every other number is kind of like inconsequential in a sort of way. 100,000 is far more significant if you think of it this way. 100,000 is far more significant than 213,000. It's kind of like you break down the door, you can kind of do anything, but everyone's just waiting for this rise after the halving for us to actually really get there. So Plan B is very popular. He's in the news quite often, but he's now saying the numbers that he said in his interviews in 2017. For those of you who remember, in the long ago when we were talking about, I believe it was an episode of What Bitcoin Did, the podcast. He was there talking and discussing, and his time frame for 2024, 2028, and 2032. That's where I remember him saying he felt like a bit uncomfortable, saying not uncomfortable, but like it was weird saying the numbers, because at that point his charts are showing a $5 to $10 million Bitcoin. And then the host was like, well, where do we go after that? And he's like, I mean, it just logically, we would obviously continue rising a lot higher. So I do myself sit in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range. And I think it's a bit weird to even say it out loud, simply because I know what this market is capable of. But we'll see when we actually end up getting there. I mean, anything past 100K is absolutely spectacular, realistically, but we're going to be going a lot higher than that. And it's just a matter of like, where do we go? Yeah. That's the Plan B. Has said some really interesting numbers. They make sense according to his chart. It's just more of a, I don't think the world would be able to handle $1 million Bitcoin next year. Do you, if we pass by 700, go away. If we pass by 700,000, that's the point when Bitcoin is worth more than gold. That's the actual, we're worth more than the entire market cap of gold, and then Bitcoin becomes the number one asset on the planet. We've seen the charts before. I don't have one here right now. $1 million Bitcoin signifies an insane, and I mean an insane amount of wealth that has been transferred in a very short period of time. The people who are holding Bitcoin become the new wealthy. And then that would still only be 2025. So this is what I'm more in the like $500,000 kind of people. I think $28 million definitely doable. If we hit over $1 million now, this means a $10 million Bitcoin is going to, I think, shatters people's reality and dimensions and have them realize that they should have been buying Bitcoin before. But we'll see. That's the Plan B news. Let's move on. So I bring this news to you because of popularity, not because of realism. Robert Kiyosaki is once again in the cryptocurrency news. And I often ask myself why sometimes, but he's one of the people who is constantly talking about the everything crisis, the everything crash, the depression, recession, like kind of thing. And he's in the news once again talking about the everything crash that he thinks is going to happen in a relative soon time of manner. The problem is that this man's been saying this for the last like 13 or 14 years. And the other part is why this news became really popular is because of the headline. For those of you who are not looking at the screen because you're doing something else, it says Robert Kiyosaki warns the biggest everything crash is coming, and then it says Bitcoin to $200. So let me explain. This news was popular because, once again, he's trying to terrify everyone that they should be doing something that he's telling them to do because everything is going to crash. But he's been saying that for over the last decade. The second part is the Bitcoin to $200. He did not say that Bitcoin was going to $200. He said that if Bitcoin fell to $200, here's what he would do. The problem is this news became super popular because everyone thought this man was talking about that Bitcoin is going to $200. You know, Bitcoin's going to fall with everything else. And I mean, if you don't know what this man said he was going to do if Bitcoin fell down to 200, the word is buy. He plans on buying up all of it. That was the generalized idea. Yeah, without having to delve any deeper into that, very popular news. There's a bunch of articles floating around it. He hasn't said anything new or spectacular other than what he normally says. Yeah, I'm going to try and be nice here, and we're going to move on from there. That's the Robert Kiyosaki says that everything's going to crash, and, you know, sure. And also he said if Bitcoin falls down to $200, what he'll do, and he'll buy it. He wants more of it. And I don't know if that's because it's like oh no, I should have bought more at 200, or like if something in his mind is actually telling him. Do you understand that like Bitcoin can never go to $200 again? If Bitcoin fell below $40,000, how many of you would start buying? If Bitcoin fell below $30,000, how many of you would start buying? If Bitcoin fell below $10,000, I think I would literally sell property and I would actually like empty my bank account. You think I'm joking, but I'm not, like no one part of me. The problem is that I'm not the only one who thinks that way. So the moment we have any kind of crash or movement down in the market, people just continue to buy. This is why the price bounces back up. So, fantastic. Whoa, $200. Can't believe that number. Okie dokie. All right. Let's move on. Also in the news, Grayscale is once again back in the news, and I'm not exactly sure if it's a tactic to make everyone afraid or think that something odd is happening, Grayscale, for those, quick run through. Grayscale has a Bitcoin ETF. They had a Bitcoin trust. They've been selling off their Bitcoin because they have to in accordance with other people who are using their ETF. The problem with their ETF is that BlackRock's fund has a fee. You have to pay a fee when you use them of, I believe, around 0.25%. Grayscale's fee is 1.5%, quite high. We heard, high. We heard from a Grayscale, this was 7 or 8 days ago. The CEO said, yeah, we know our fee is high and we will eventually lower it as the market matures. And I was like, are you guys trying to go broke? So I think there's something else behind the scenes, one of those rich person in a castle, lightning is striking behind him as he's like stroking a hairless cat, because there's nothing that would let me know. If I saw the guy across the street had a 0.25% fee and I'm looking at my sign and it says 1.5, I would go, hey, maybe we should lower it. But he said they're not going to be doing that. So as such, Grayscale's fund, their ETF, has been seeing outflows since the actual advent of the ETFs. However, it's now making the rounds in the news again as if this is new news. I don't know if it's people looking for a reason per se as to why prices fell, or maybe it's simply, and a lot of times news can enter the space because people are trying to manipulate prices. We've seen it thousands and thousands of times. However, this news is now popping up again as if it's not that it's not. No, it's not scary at all. And it's not that it's not news. It's just more of they have had nonstop outflows for like 2.5 months now. So there's nothing really new or spectacular about it, except that now the news is popping up. And when you read through the articles, everyone's like, yeah, this is a crazy time. Money's flowing out. And it's like, well, money's also still flowing into the other ETFs as well, usually like on like the same basis. So if we see 200 million leaving Grayscale, usually there's like 280 million going into the other ETFs. So wonderful. Grayscale is still being forced to sell, as people who have been working with them are probably like, why aren't you guys lowering your fees? I'm going to go to the company that owns everything. And I don't understand why Grayscale will not lower their fees. But once again, I'm telling you, there's some castle cat thing going on, because I feel like someone's telling them not to lower their fee, because it's a little weird, right? It's a little weird. Okie dokie. That's the Grayscale news. Moving along. For some reason, this is one of the like hyped news stories. I'm not sure if it's because we're inching ever closer to the possibility of Ethereum ETFs, but the Ethereum news is like, geez Louise. Ethereum co-founder Vitalik Buterin has launched a proposal to enhance the decentralization and fairness of the Ethereum network staking process, marking a significant stride in refining the protocol. They've been talking about doing something with the staking process for a while, and not that none of them have worked. I think all people really, can we be honest here? I think that people really only care about the fact that there is staking and that they can make money from it. I think a lot of the Ethereum team is maybe getting reviews from very wealthy people who want the system to change, maybe more in their favor. But I think the everyday average person is probably just fine with the way that things are now, seeing as we also, one does not need 32 Ether to be able to stake or to validate. You can simply join a staking pool, if you will, to make the rewards. But there's always some new, whenever they have a new upgrade, like they just had the Deneb Cancun one, there's always a new proposal thrown out to talk about something new is on the horizon. And it's like, I don't think the average person really cares about it anymore. Ethereum works. People are building on top of it. People are making money. The coin's price is going to go up. We might have ETFs. We might see a $10,000 Ether this year. That's as far as I think that the human brain is currently going. Dubbed the Anti-Correlation Incentive Program. Okay. This initiative seeks to penalize what is considered routine mistakes by validators, such as failing to complete an attestation, a process vital for the network security and efficiency. The rationale behind Buterin's proposal stems from an observation within decentralized systems. Errors made by one participant are likely to be mirrored across other nodes or validators controlled by the same entity. So he's basically trying to stop people from copying other nodes who might be doing something incorrect. Fan wonderful. Also, for some reason in the news quite a lot lately is the idea of layer 3s. In the cryptocurrency space, all that used to exist were the main chains: Ethereum, Bitcoin, Litecoin, XRP, you name it, the original chains. And then the people from Ethereum realized that they had been telling us that they were going to have, monstrous upgrades to the main chain by 2017, 2018 that never transpired. We still don't have them. And this evolved into the idea of side chains. Basically, literally other chains that hang off the main chain that allow it to process extra transactions, what have you. Side chains then became the idea of layer 2s. So imagine like a tube, then you put another tube around it. That's the layer 2 for it, kind of protecting the layer beneath it to allow it to process extra transactions, to have other things built on top of it, and the finalization of the transactions or the thing that's taking place would be done on the layer 1 so that the layer 1 remains intact. You can batch a whole bunch of transactions. You can have 9,000 things happening in one, box that then flows into the layer 1. Cool, amazing. Layer 2s still aren't perfect. Like, they're good, and a lot of them are okay, but now for some reason everyone's talking about layer 3s. It's similar to, this is giving me the same kind of vibes as like the whole Web 3 thing. Web 1 was early 90s, mid 90s, I think until around, in terms, I think it's supposed to be around until 2006, 7, or 8, until we got like social media. That was then supposed to be Web 2, and we're currently living through Web 2. Web 3 is meant to be about like hyper decentralization, doing things by yourself. There's no governing body. We all govern each other on these chains, and love and freedom and happiness and decentralized exchanges, etc. Nearly every single Web 3 thing has been hyper centralized and has been controlled by a small number of people. A lot of companies the last 2 years came out of nowhere talking about they were getting into Web 3, and then we found out that they were just as centralized as JP Morgan Chase, basically. They made the rules. They said what was going on. They said what was happening. They were stealing people's money. This is how we figured out that these weren't actual Web 3 decentralized things. We knew from a number of ways. One was because of the SEC. The SEC was sending a lot of these companies letters. You can't really send Bitcoin a letter, but they were sending letters to these companies who had actual physical locations, as I've said before. Some of these projects had guys. It was just 3 or 4 guys inside of a room, and they made all the rules for the project and then got shut down. What was the other way? Yes, all the rug pulls. Yeah. So a lot of people were throwing millions of dollars into these projects, and then they just disappeared, which is also supposed to happen for Web 3 because it's supposed to be run by the community, and you can't simply up and run when everyone's running a node or a validator, which shows that a lot of these things were not actually Web 3. And I don't think we're ever going to get to Web 3 anytime soon, because that would require people giving up power that they don't want to give up. That even goes for cryptocurrency companies. There's a reason why Coinbase and Binance and Kraken are structured the way that they are, is for them to maintain control. If they gave up the control and allowed the network to actually form consensus, imagine everyone using Coinbase was allowed to vote on what Coinbase did. Coinbase sometimes has fees of literally 25%. Not a joke number, 25% for some of the things that they offer. If they gave everyone a vote, everyone could be like, well, the fee is now 0%. When transactions happen, Coinbase gets a cut of the transaction. Imagine the network was allowed to vote and they said, nope, the network fee for you, or the fee that Coinbase gets, is now half of 1 cent per 10 transactions. See, you have to want to relinquish power, but they don't want to because it's just about money for them. The other part is, for some reason, the idea about layer 3s is now popping up. And it's like, can we finish layer 2? This is very similar to when the day we got Bitcoin ETFs, everyone was talking about Ethereum ETFs. Why can we never bask in the glory of what we currently have? It always has to be like the next step when we haven't even finished the puzzle behind us. Always very, very weird. The CEO of Polygon is criticizing layer 3 networks, claiming they devalue Ethereum. Let's finish with layer 2. Why is everyone talking about layer 3? Because the moment we have a proper layer 3 that ends up being popular, someone's going to come out with something and say, we have layer 4. And it's like, stop. It's getting a little bit out of hand right now. So Vitalik Buterin has been in the news a lot lately, as has everything with Ethereum. The hype is definitely there. The people want the ETF and everyone's screaming at the top of their lungs. I keep seeing a lot of mildly optimistically pessimistic news where people don't think there's going to be an ETF to be had, but people think that it's going to happen. You get it? So a lot of the news is like, well, we don't see the ETFs happening, but they're probably going to get an ETF sometime this year. And it's like, okay, cool. As opposed to just waiting to see what ends up happening. But I think people in crypto are it's something above impatience, if you will. But I understand, but I'm also like, just calm down. Jeez Louise, like sit down for a second. Yeah, that's the Ethereum is in the news in a multitude of ways. Everyone's talking about all these different things on top of the project, and we'll see when we get there eventually. You know, cool, fantastic. I think that's definitely going to do it for this video. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.